We're really thrilled to be sharing this discussion with so many people. It's quite a record for the National Justice Project. So obviously the topic has piqued a lot of interest and is very timely, and very much hope that the insights that you take away from this online meeting are practical and inspiring. So I'm going to open with an introduction to myself. I'm Amelia Salgado. I am the Co-General Manager of the National Justice Project. And in today's webinar, I'm joined by a wonderful panel, and I'll introduce each person separately. But we might just take a moment now to do an acknowledgement of country. And the National Justice Project and my home office today is located on the unceded sovereign lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We acknowledge the continuing connection to land, waters, communities, and culture of First Nation peoples, and we pay our respects to elders, past and present. So today's perspectives of trauma-informed and culturally safe service delivery is recorded, and I'm pretty sure the conversation will inspire you to ask questions. In fact, we really hope you do. If you can please use the chat so that at the end of this discussion, the panelists will be able to address your questions one by one. So yeah, please don't hold back with questions. Just understand that we're going to come to them at the end of this webinar. Okay, so the overall objective of World Mental Health Day is to raise awareness about mental health and to garner and I guess build momentum around the supports that exist and ought to be in place. Towards this objective, the National Justice Project is pleased to host this online event to explore professional and community perspectives on the importance and challenge of delivering trauma-informed and culturally safe care, services to communities impacted by racism, impacted by trauma, and impacted by discrimination. So we know, and we know this very well, that some community groups experience overlapping and intersecting forms of racism and discrimination that go hand in hand when accessing human services. Because trauma and crisis are often joined, it is vital that service providers take an intersectional approach when supporting people and engage in a way that minimises the possibilities of re-traumatising clients, of re-exposing people to harm, and supports the individual's journey of healing and recovery. To speak to these important issues, I'm very fortunate today to be joined by my panel, and I'd like to introduce each one of them. First of all, Moz, or Mostafa Azimitabar. Hello, Moz.
Hi, everyone. How are you?
Thanks so much for being here. Moz is a Kurdish artist, musician, writer, human rights activist, and 2022 Archibald finalist. Wow, what an introduction. Phenomenal. It's great we've got Moz with us here. His journey is quite a journey to get here. He escaped persecution in Iran, and Moz arrived in Australia in 2013 seeking asylum. He was detained in Australia's brutal and draconian off- and onshore immigration system for more than 8 years after being released on a bridging visa in January 21. So we salute your tremendous journey, Moz, and are so thankful to have your lived experience in many ways, as sad as it is, to inform our discussion today. And Kimberly Hunter. Now, Kimberly Hunter is a proud Nginya woman from the West Kimberley region of Western Australia. Sadly, Kimberly can't be here at this point. She may be able to join us towards the end, but something unforeseen popped up, and we will have her here on a pre-recorded video, and she may also pop in at the end. Well, fingers crossed. Anyway, Kimberly Hunter is a research and policy advisor at the Australian Human Rights Commission, and she supports the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner, and she is here to share and advance the priorities of First Nation women and girls across the country. Kimberley is also a board director of Indigenous Allied Health Australia. Jon Owen is CEO and pastor of Sydney's Wayside Chapel. He has over 20 years' experience in social work, community development and outreach, including at Melbourne's urban neighbourhoods of hope. And Sophie is a colleague. Sophie Wenderoth is a proud disabled Ashkenazi Sephardi Jewish woman. She is a senior paralegal at the National Justice Project and is in her final year of a Juris Doctor at Macquarie University. Sophie is also a carer, an advocate for a disabled family member, and is passionate about disability rights and justice. To begin our discussion, please bear with me because the question was for Kimberly, and Kimberly will be with us, but we will be talking to her first through a pre-recorded section. So Kimberly, this first discussion to kick off our panel is about the issue that is faced by First Nations peoples in this country, and they are often denied access to quality healthcare due to racism and discrimination. And systemic discrimination in our health system disproportionately impacts First Nations individuals and communities. Kimberly is now going to join us, and she's going to talk about what does an appropriate strengths-based approach look like in the delivery of mainstream health services. We'll just now transition to our pre-recorded section with Kimberly speaking.
Hi everyone, thank you for the question. Before I jump in, I just want to acknowledge that I'm on Bidjigal country today and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also extend that acknowledgement to other First Nations listeners and the many countries that you come from and the lands, languages, laws, histories and sacred knowledges that you carry. And on today's World Mental Health Day, I'm holding close to my heart those loved ones that we've lost and those who are really struggling at the moment. And it's my hope that with marking occasions like today, we can all bring a bit more presence to our lives and do our bit to help make this world a better place. Lastly, I just want to acknowledge my fellow panelists who I'm sitting alongside today. It's a real honour to be sharing this space with you all. And thank you to the NJP for bringing us all together. I want to begin by prefacing this question by reminding everyone that First Nations people know what good mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health looks like. And the evidence is in our survival as the longest continuous living culture on the planet. Our ways of being are largely framed with wellness in mind. And that's not only wellness for ourselves, but that's our entire ecosystems. And our mobs have done this for centuries by following the seasons, upholding our kinship responsibilities and duty of care, not only to our blood relatives, but to our non-human relations as well, plants and animals too. We've cared for country coexisting in a state of balance that removes hierarchy. And this way of being teaches us the importance of collective well-being to sustain generations far into the future. And unfortunately, mainstream medical Western health services largely fail to recognise this strength and this knowledge that exists within and upon the stolen lands that their services operate on. And this is a detriment not only to First Nations peoples, but to all Australians. There's a couple of things that come to mind when thinking about appropriate strength-based approaches to delivering health services and what that looks like. And firstly, for health services to be accessible, they need to be physically available, which often isn't the case in rural and remote areas. They need to be culturally safe and affordable. These are all factors that First Nations women and girls spoke really strongly about as limiting factors throughout the Winyani Yuthanganing Women's Voices consultations and report, which has been led over the last 5 years by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Social Justice Commissioner June Oscar AO, and is a project that I've been really lucky to be a part of as well for the last few years. But these are also the same struggles that our mob have been banging on about for years and years, and it's the whole reason, you know, women like Colleen Shirley Smith, or Mum Shirl, as she was better known by, established the Redfern AMS in the early 70s, which became the first Aboriginal community-controlled health service. And now we have over 140 of these right across Australia. And this again reinforces that mainstream health services have historically and presently continued to fail us and our unique needs. And this is why people like my late Uncle Puggy, Dr. Arnold Hunter, fought uncompromisingly for health justice for our mob, because the fight for justice is synonymous with the fight for health equality. And people like my Uncle Puggy have no doubt shaped the trajectory of my life and my involvement within the health space. And I want to mention one of the organisations that I've been proudly involved in for the last 9 years, called Indigenous Allied Health Australia. And IHA is a national member-based organisation and peak body representing First Nations allied health professionals and students. So this is all about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander occupational therapists like myself, physiotherapists, speech paths, optometrists, etc. Basically all the allied health professions that are other than medical and nursing. And IHA offers a range of workforce development support, advocacy within the health policy space, and professional, personal, and cultural supports for our members. And one of the key strategic directions is to transform and influence change within the Australian health system through culturally responsive practice and service delivery. And one of the ways that IHA has been doing this has been through the development and delivery of their cultural responsiveness framework and training. And if I can leave you all with 2 resources to go away and look into after today, it would be the Winyani Yuthanganing Women's Voices report, which is an extension, has been an extension of my arm for the last 5 years. And IHA's Cultural Responsiveness in Action framework. And IHA's framework and training guides individuals on their cultural responsiveness journey, the key word here being journey, acknowledging that there is no destination when it comes to cultural responsiveness. It is a lifelong, ongoing project. And the framework acknowledges that to create real, lasting change at a systemic level, organisations and individuals must be critical drivers in creating culturally safe and responsive systems. So for me, in my imagining of what appropriate strengths-based mainstream health services look like, it is a commitment from all levels of the health workforce and other sectors to be engaged in this type of community-driven, strength-based, action-orientated professional and personal development that acknowledges culture as a strength, that unpacks conscious and unconscious bias, that explores the impact of racism on health, and that holds people accountable to the communities that they serve.
Thanks so much to Kimberly for providing that pre-recorded response to one of the first panel questions. Kimberly, although she can't be with us, did pre-record a second question. So the second question will be her response to a question about barriers. What are some of the barriers that First Nations people face when accessing and engaging with mainstream healthcare systems? So we're going to move to her second part of her response. And she's also going to address what are some of the examples of best practice that she's been able to observe in her work, and what are some of the broad ideas about best practice that could be useful for other practitioners and services to incorporate or consider. So back to Kimberly.
Thank you for that question. I think racism would have to be up there with one of, if not the biggest barrier that our mob face when it comes to accessing and engaging in healthcare systems. And as I mentioned earlier, the affordability and the availability of services is another huge barrier, and this is only exacerbated in rural and remote areas. And, evidence does confirm that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in remote areas are more likely to pay out-of-pocket expenses for health assessments and treatments compared to those living in major cities. And this is largely due to there being fewer GP visits bulk billed in rural and remote areas. And if you've got mob living below the poverty line in a remote area who have the choice to put fuel in their car and drive 3 hours to an appointment and pay for medication versus, putting food on the table for their kids or paying electricity so that their elders can sit in aircon when it's over 40 degrees heat, they're obviously going to go for that second option. So there really does need to be major reform to the healthcare system and broader sectors as well. And, given the disproportionate burden of illness that First Nations people face, the investment into targeted primary healthcare interventions should be, 2 to 3 times that of the non-Indigenous rate. And when you look to best practice examples, honestly, no one does it better than our Aboriginal community-controlled health services. And it's places like the Institute for Urban Indigenous Health in Queensland and Women's South Coast Women's Centres in New South Wales and the Kimberley Aboriginal Medical Service in Broome, who are really leading the way in best practice examples, that show how we can not only walk in two worlds, but thrive in two worlds. And these holistic, trauma-informed, strength-based, community-driven services and ways of working, they hold the solutions to the problems that we are faced with, and they must be adequately invested in so that they can reach their full potential and their full impact.
Thank you, Kimberly. I'm now going to move to a discussion with Jon Owen. And Jon, just to remind you, is a CEO and pastor of Sydney's Wayside Chapel. So, Jon, I'd like to ask you a little bit about police responders. We know that police often lack the skills required for identifying, understanding, and responding to people with complex needs. I wonder if you could talk a little about the role of police as default first responders to a range of social and health issues, including mental ill health, disability, addiction, homelessness, and poverty.
Thanks, Amelia. I appreciate everyone logging in today. Thank you. Now I've just got to pop on my kids call these my serial killer in training glasses because I've had to start wearing one through this time. But before I begin to answer that question quickly, I do have to own the fact that I come to this conversation as a member of the clergy, which perhaps has been on the wrong side of many of the issues that we're dealing with today. So I want to acknowledge that. I wear many hats in this conversation. Other ones I do wear, though, as a social worker as well, who has worked in communities that have significant challenges when it comes to structural and generational disadvantage and poverty. And I also come to this conversation as a person of colour, as well as, and I wear a lot of hats, but the one I wear most closely on my heart is as the parent of a child with borderline personality disorder, amongst another range of mental health challenges as she continues to grow and develop. So this topic is very close to my heart. I think it's important when we think about police and police responders, particularly obviously Wayside. We do a lot of work in the space where we have people who are sleeping rough come through our doors regularly, and we support a couple of hundred people each day who are facing issues around homelessness, impending homelessness, and also family and domestic violence. So we often interact with the police. Wayside is located in Bondi Beach and King's Cross, and they are two of the King's Cross local area command is actually the smallest in Australia in terms of it's 2.4 square kilometres. It's the smallest local area command. And so we have great opportunities actually in this neighbourhood to build good relationships with the police. But I think for us to understand the culture and the mindset of police, we should all probably read a book like The Fatal Shore by Robert Hughes. That's probably the best way to get into the mindset that was set up in the establishment of settlement in this country, where it has a real focus on a culture of control and compliance, enforced compliance, that still prevails to this day. I was just talking with a close friend who was retired from the police after 3 decades very recently, and he said that culture is still prevalent today. The training that many first responders police receive when it comes to mental health care, trauma-informed responses, and working with minorities and is minimal. Out of the 6 to 8 weeks or 12 weeks that they're at Goulburn in New South Wales, you'd be lucky to scratch a day. And they're always really keen to, still to this day, fold all the training into one afternoon so they can give everyone the afternoon off the barracks. And that should concern us, because I think last year it was estimated, or the last few years, about 50 to 60,000 calls come to New South Wales emergency responses that come through 000 that are direct attendance of people who are struggling with mental health situations. And that leads to and points to an incredibly high need for increased resources and training. Sadly, we do a lot of work in a space, we do make this joke as a member of clergy, but it's not really a joke, is what's often known by our guys as the Holy Trinity of charges. Is someone is having a bad day, the police are called to attend, and then they're suddenly arrested with the Holy Trinity, which is resist arrest, affray, and assaulting a police officer. And so we see that, and that is because they are the ones who are first attending. And how we do anything is how we do everything. The medium is the method. If you attend a scene with sirens flashing, lights blaring, you are not entering into a scenario with any mindset, and with a mindset of culture, control, and compliance. You're not entering that in any way, shape, or form in a mode of de-escalation, which we know is one of the cause to in trauma-informed care. And I guess the other mindset that we need to be aware of as we engage in this conversation is around the need for us to really address the root issue of, I think, our nation's great social policy is incarceration. It has been since settlement. If you have troubles with mental health, we'll lock you up. If you're an asylum seeker looking to claim political asylum here, we will lock you up. If you, just insert any new emerging social group, it's incarceration. And still, so we really need to address the commercialization of incarceration that, we would think that we would not be so silly as to follow America with education and healthcare and incarceration, yet I think we managed to repeat their errors with terrifying rapidity and predictability. So, you know, unfortunately, the lack of training, resources, and the cultural mindset that many police interact with in first responses is often creates the opposite situation of de-escalating, to the point where sometimes we have managed to de-escalate a scenario. By the time the police attend, all trust is kind of broken and lost, let alone between the therapeutic bond between us and the people we're working with, but also sometimes people who have been de-escalated then get thrown to the ground, handcuffed and thrown into paddy wagons to be questioned at a later date. So there are, where all this, I'm trying to paint a picture that says, you know, if we continue to do what we've always done, we're going to continue to get what we've always had. And now's the time for some real change.
Well, on the topic of change, Jon, can you talk to us about any alternative models that exist that prioritise de-escalation, compassion, safety, and promote ongoing recovery-oriented, trauma-informed support and treatment over a police response? What would that program look like?
Yeah, there are some great pilots out there, and there's a lot of research going into it. There's a simple answer, which is half the time is don't call the cops. Sadly, I don't want to sound too negative on that, but I've yet to see very effective responses in that space, particularly where there is a heightened scenario. Of course, we need to work carefully. There is a pilot going on in New South Wales that's received an additional $20-30 million worth of funding in the last budget, called the PACER program, where together an assessment and an evaluation is made from that 000 response call. It still requires police to be the first attending on the scene. And when we take into account many communities and people in the community who have had consistent and repeated poor and bad outcome engagements with the police, that often is still has negative effects. It has had some positive impacts. We're seeing less hospitalizations. We're seeing police attending scenes of incidents or alleged incidents for shorter periods of time. We can still do a lot more. It's if we just leave this program, which has been running for a long time, to continue, it kind of lets everyone off the hook because they say, oh, look, it's being funded. It's happening for a few years now. Way more needs to be done. I know that even where we have the fire brigade turn up as first responders, often they have far better outcomes than police in certain incidences, because, you know, there's even the siren sounds different and the uniform is seen in a very different way than some of the police uniforms. America's doing a lot of responses with first aid, mental health care, trauma-informed care trained units that are seeing, surprise, surprise, way less arrests that are occurring because the Holy Trinity is not turning up on the scene. And and also what I'm really keen to keep tracking on is the new head to health centres. There's one that's been piloted in Penrith, and this is where, as a parent, where my child or now adult is feeling their mental health slipping, the only place they can go to is an A&E of a major hospital. And so one of the things the head to health centres is trialling is a mental health A&E. So it is very much designed along some beautiful frameworks where it's around de-escalation, quiet zones. You're not sitting next to someone from a car accident or someone who's groaning with kidney stone pain. You are placed in individual units and attended to by people who have specific mental health care training. So all told, these are things that can be, that are some pretty exciting pilots. I think we all want to, we all dream of a day where police can attend to crime and not create situations that become criminalised. There are so many policy directions we can head to, particularly around some decriminalisation of use and possession of illicit drugs in very small quantities, because that can often reinstigate a cycle of incarceration for someone who perhaps hasn't been locked up for years and years and years, having a bad day. So I just wish we could have a country where your worst day didn't mean you got locked up again and you got cared for instead. Thanks for listening to me rant.
No, not a rant at all. Very insightful, and we know that you draw from so much experience, and the Wayside Chapel environment itself is within a pocket that you come across many communities that we do, as well as the National Justice Project. And my next question, and you're certainly not ranting, Jon, so I'm not going to let you get away with that. Considering the communities that you work with, what sort of care and support needs to be prioritised across all service settings to best protect and promote wellbeing?
I think. Sorry, could you just cut out there? That's the question.
Sure. Given the challenge faced by the communities in the area where you work, what sort of care and support needs to be prioritised across all service settings to best protect and promote wellbeing?
I think around the assessment phase, and I think we really do have great opportunities for police to take seriously their community engagement and to reframe the way they are viewed in many scenarios, in many communities, or to attend to far more higher levels of trainings there that can really make sure that the initial assessment phase, which is the key, because that will determine their response. And sometimes, and also, if we could have greater community training and greater community awareness of what does and does not constitute 000 worthy calls, we would have a greater chance. I think, and one of the people I saw just chatting there is one of my friends who I've been chatting with, is we need to build far better alliances between our organisations and the police. But, and also we've got too much, every time you pilot something new, some other group funding comes under threat. And I just don't know how we begin to address some of that territorialism that we just have far too many levels of governance in this country that as soon as you want to do something new, everyone will fight you on the fact that they'll lose their funding. It's always complex.
That is indeed a complex and very tricky puzzle to navigate, and we certainly won't go down that rabbit hole of in this discussion. But thank you for bringing so much to your responses, and I'm sure I've actually been watching the chats are filling up with questions, so you've really inspired people to think and consider. I'd also like to bring in Kimberly. Kimberly has arrived. Thank you, Kimberly. Lovely to have you here. And your pre-recorded parts were wonderful. But it's even better to see you here online with us now. So thanks for coming along. We won't ask the backstory. I'm sure it was complex, but it's good to see you here. And we'll come back to
apologies I'm late.
All right. Well, lovely to have you with us. And when we come back to the Q&A section, we'll hope that you can jump into Moz Azimitabar has been patiently waiting, and it's brilliant to have you with us, Moz. We know that refugees and people seeking asylum have often been through multiple traumatic experiences and human rights violations in their country of origin, and then again in Australia's immigration detention system. Your story would reduce us all to tears, so we probably won't go into the details, but we know that you've come through a very, very difficult process to be here. And it's your lived experience which is so important to keep hearing, as the national psyche still seems to be myopic and unable to really take on the depth of the trauma that many refugee and asylum seekers have faced. There's a deafening silence, but I'm just congratulating you for being here with us, and we really respect your effort to maintain your creativity and be able to participate in this, where you can actually help us and help the community to further understand the situation and the mental trauma of refugee and asylum seekers. My question, Moz, to you is, how can service providers, including the Australian government, better understand and respect individual responses to trauma and foster better relationships? And what sort of impact might this approach have on people's well-being?
Thanks for having me. First of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land of which we stand today, the Gadigal land of Eora Nation. I would like to pay my respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, elders, past, present, and emerging. When you often talk about detention and how you can improve the situation with people in detention, you cannot lose sight of the fact that the setup of the detention is totally evil. And if you are creating art or music or doing meditation as caseworkers for people who are locked up in detention, ultimately, it is not actually fixing the problem. We need to focus on this. Be careful not to legitimize the system. The system has set up like a bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Evil is not a monster. Evil is often people who are upholding or participating in unjust bureaucracy. The whole system is taking away human rights. No matter what trauma response we do, the situation itself is causing trauma. For example, every month, I receive a phone call from a person that claims that he's working for Home Affairs, and he claims that he's my caseworker. So I see that a few people are monitoring me, that are you still living in Kingsburg? You are not gonna resettle in Australia at all. You have this option to go. We know that you don't want to go to America, but you have this option to go to America. Also, if you want to go back to your country, please let us know. We can help you to get back. Just imagine when they talk to a person who has been traumatized, who has been tortured for, it's like 10 years now, 8 years in detention and 2 years in the community, and how they talk to me. It doesn't matter in which situation a person can be in this situation. I mean, it can be a minister is smiling at people, and like a few ministers who always smiling, and a couple of decades ago, they were pro-refugees, but they are in the position of torturing refugees now, and they are smiling at us. And next day, we received letters from Home Affairs that you have to leave Australia. Australia will never, ever be your country. And at the same time, my people in Iran, Kurdish people, are being killed by the regime of Iran, who are killing massively innocent people. So this is something that we need to talk about it. Everything is a trauma. Why do I have to see this in my life? It's like 36 years I'm living in this world, and many times I have seen torture in my life. And when it's gonna be finished, when people like me are not a part of this country, when they say that, like a few elections before, like Liberal Party, their slogan was, these people are illegal, illiterate, dangerous. We don't want them to be in Australia. And now the government changed, millions of people vote out the government, but still we see that this system is corrupt. We don't want detention to exist in this country, because this language is violating human rights. When it's a big part of it talks about the power, that how a person or a system or a party can have unlimited power to create a place in a residential area and put innocent people who were sick by this cruel system, and they locked the door and they said that this power is legal. So, but what I'm saying is that sometimes we don't have to follow the rules. We don't need to follow these people who are creating this cruel system. We need to challenge them. Unfortunately, we don't have a proper challenge in Australia. Why, for example, why was not allowed to study in Australia? Why no one is listening to me? Why everything is about food? Why organizations outside detention are always talk about food? Why studying is not priority? Why getting a qualification is not priority? Why mental health and dental health is not priority? Everything reduced this person to be a story for people in Australia. Why refugees are not getting proper support? Why we don't have accommodation? This is important. Not an organization get $30 million from people and always talk about food. We are going to cook for these people because these people are hungry. So refugees in Australia have been introduced to the nation illegal, illiterate, and hungry people. But they never talk about but this system never talk about the positivity, the resistance, how you can be resistant and how you can be nice even with the people who have locked us up. We even were nice to people who tortured us for 10 years. And now still we are receiving letters from ministers from the system that you cannot be resettled in Australia. Go back to the place that they are going to kill you. Go anywhere else. We don't know where it is. A third country, find a place. This system, we need to fight with it. We need to make a war with this system. When I say war, I don't mean physical war. I don't mean to break any walls. I mean a system that when a minister smile at refugees, and I want to show the real face in social media. They are smiling, but they are still don't know the answer, because 10 years ago they agreed that they cannot be a part of this society, and people who vote them out want these politicians to consider refugees like Mos to be a part of this society and consider me as a survivor, not an illiterate or dangerous person for society. And I'm also very lucky from this suffering, I achieved some good things to learn how to can create something like art to challenge this system, to show people that the ones who locked me up, the ones who locked 1,000 people in detention, they are corrupt. Already we have over 1,200 refugees like me in detention, and for each one of them, they get $1 million from people for torturing these innocent behind the electric wires, behind the fences. And 40 years ago, we didn't have, Australia didn't have concentration camps. They slowly built this cruelty. Like 40 years ago, there were not pat-down search. And now there are 6 times, 8 times, 10 times pat-down search of a person who is behind detention. And they said, this is a rule. We are following the rules. But this rule failed human rights. But these rules, we need to stop the torture, that if the new government won the election, they have to reduce the torture. They have to sort out this problem, not to add the problem. If the new government got the power, why they don't close the Park Hotel, for example? The Park Hotel was created by the Liberal Party, and Labour Party it's still open in the name of Labour Party as well. And we want all the detention in Australia to be closed. And if someone is criminal, they should go to jail. And the innocent people no one deserves to be in that torture centers.
No, your testimony is it's a horrific and honest reflection of the dehumanization that this government has and the government before. And in fact, you talk about the system of torture not having been here. It's been here from the start of this country, since the settlement. It's just revived and come out in another direction. But this is part of the psyche of this country. It unfortunately does have deep roots, and your trauma is something we all feel. And all I can say, Moz, is through your life, you have resisted, and the creative arts for you has been an avenue of tremendous resistance. And we can only, as an audience, commend you for having the tenacity and the creativity to not overcome, because you haven't overcome. This is ongoing for you, but to have a place where you can, through the arts, channel your feelings, work with the feelings, and also bring more attention to the plight that you and many others are suffering. And through your struggles, we struggle. And through either the power of the pen or the paintbrush or whatever mode or medium you use, you are able to communicate. And it's through continuing to tell these stories. It's basically the most important thing we have. So the storytelling through music, through art, through pen, through your presentation now is a sign of, in a way, your own inner health, despite the struggle, your mental health. You can say this. You haven't gone into complete silence and depression. You are talking. You are expressing your anger. It's no remedy, but it's an avenue, and it's better than not having the avenue. So I understand what you're saying in terms of, the question initially was framed as, how can art therapy or these sessions be curative for people that are locked in a broken and criminal system? Well, thank you. You've pretty much shone a very good light on that question. And I think in terms of without going further into it, I think what you could say from what I hear from your experience is that the arts has been an incredible strength to you. And perhaps people that are working in areas where they're dealing with or supporting people that are coming through the trauma of being locked up in Australia will be able to encourage people to also explore these avenues. It must be some relief to you as a human being to have a way of taking the internal and the trauma and being able to express it. So it's no solution, but I think what you've done is curative in its own way. So thank you, Moz, for sharing, and good on you for continuing to discuss it and going out into the world and telling people. We are a really apathetic lot. And it's something about hearing the stories that always, for me, it's always through storytelling that I'm reminded and I can, with empathy, then further action in life. So thank you very much. We are kind of really rolling on with time, so I am going to bring in Sophie Wenderoth. Sophie, we know the lack of awareness and knowledge about disability increases the risk of harm and re-traumatization for people with disabilities when accessing human services. Reflecting on your experiences and observations, both as a disabled person and as a carer. How have your experiences shaped the way you approach, interact with, and support clients?
Thank you, Amelia. I would also like to start by acknowledging that today I'm dialing in from the unceded sovereign lands of the Gadigal people, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to any First Nations people listening today. And I'd also like to say thank you to Moz, Kimberly and Jon for their insights and contributions. It's such an honour to share this space with all of you. I think in order to talk about how my experiences have shaped the way I approach, interact with and support clients, it's important to start with what those experiences have been. I've often myself experienced and seen as a carer and as an advocate that disabled people are dismissed, we're not listened to, our perspectives aren't appreciated, and we're looked down on. We're not viewed as being capable of advocating effectively for ourselves. I have a recent experience I can draw on as an example of this. I recently took some forms into a government department's office, and on those forms I had listed that I'm disabled. The person working looked at that and asked, "Oh, so you're the representative for Sophie?" And I said, "No, I am Sophie." And I saw the surprise on their face. I'm autistic, but even I could pick up on the subtle implication in this interaction that it's surprising that I'd be able to advocate for myself. As a carer, I've seen that there is a certain language that is spoken to get providers to listen to you. It's so discriminatory because if you don't speak their language, you're much less likely to get noticed or to be taken seriously. But with my legal training, as soon as I write a letter or ask a few of the right questions, suddenly the organisation we're speaking with or the person that we're speaking to is listening. That's just some of the systemic discrimination that is faced by many disabled people, and especially when you look at intersectionality and the discrimination faced by disabled people from other marginalised communities too. These experiences when you're trying to access healthcare or other human services can in and of themselves be traumatizing, especially when you feel you're communicating clearly and the person you're talking to is not listening, or they've not understood you, and then they explain to you things you already know, but they assume you wouldn't understand. An example of this can be you're referred to an application form or a service. You can explain why you can't fill out the form or why it's not relevant for you, and you're dismissed and again referred to the form or the service or whatever it might be without really being heard. So when we're talking about how these kinds of experiences have shaped the way I approach, interact with and support clients, my number one principle is that I listen to the clients. I believe them when they tell me their experiences. I hear them when they tell me what they need from us as their legal team. I think it's also always important to be mindful that we won't always know what our clients have experienced, but they will likely have experienced discrimination and there will likely be trauma associated with that discrimination. It's important in our work to always have this in mind so that we're not re-traumatizing people. By communicating openly with clients, we can create a professional relationship that is based on mutual respect and trust, and one where we learn from clients about how best to communicate and make them feel safe. This helps to reduce the possibilities of re-traumatization. Part of this process, though, can also be how we go about communicating what is possible for us to do and to help with, and what we're not able to do. I'm very mindful that there are many times in a disabled person's life that they hear no, or this can't be done, or we can't help, with no explanation, no context, and no support for a way forward. As a charity not-for-profit legal service, the National Justice Project has limited resources, but where possible, we do try to communicate with clients about what we can and can't assist with and why. And I think the why is particularly important. You can validate someone's experience and listen to them when they communicate to you their needs and still let them know there are things you're not going to be able to assist with, but letting them know this in a way that lets them know it's not because you don't believe them or that you don't see the value in their experience. Sometimes you might want to help, but it's systemic issues that prevent you from helping. Maybe being able to acknowledge that that doesn't do anything to resolve the main issue for the client, but it does at least let them know it's not because you didn't value what they had to say. then I think it's important to separately think about and reflect on those issues. If there's systemic discrimination that prevents you from assisting people who need your help, what can you do about that? I think this type of reflection is important because it allows you to evaluate both what you can do to assist the client today in your job capacity, but also what you can do as a human being living in this world among other human beings who are shut out of systems and discriminated against. One of my favorite quotes, and it seems relevant to share it now, comes from Hillel the Elder, and he says, "If I am not for me, who will be for me? And if I'm for myself alone, what am I? And if not now, then when?" But without wanting to spend this time being focused on the systemic issues, I think it's important to acknowledge them both now and when working with traumatized clients, especially clients from marginalized communities. I think this next principle I try to adopt in how I approach, interact with, and support clients is not having rigid ideas about how a client has to be or what they need to do. Being neurodivergent myself, I know how masking can impact significantly on your interactions with others, and it can be so exhausting. Aside from that, there is inherent ableism in requiring people to only communicate in certain ways or to act or be a certain way. Being raised by a community of people from various cultural backgrounds and being Jewish myself, I know that cultural context and considerations are important in client interactions and support too. So being mindful of how you communicate with clients and the space you create for them is so important. Clients should feel safe and comfortable to be who they are and communicate in the way that is best for them. This isn't without its own challenges. Sometimes, for instance, the nuance of a conversation can quite literally be lost in translation. But for disabled people, especially with intersecting identities, it's crucial that a space is as safe and comfortable as possible for them to be who they are. I know all too well how much the legal profession values perfection. And so I think it's about rethinking this, especially for clients. And I'm mindful of time, so maybe I should leave it there and hand it back to you, Amelia.
Oh, thanks, Sophie. I think you've touched on some great points, and actually, a few questions have come up that we can that you could answer that will allow you to go into some of the other material you'd prepared. But I am mindful of time too, because guess what? It's 2:00, and I know that Jon has to leave soon. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask Jon a question that's come through the chat. And asking you first because you might have to dash off. So, Jon, given the state-sanctioned violence operating through the police and prisons, can we really attach trauma-informed to such institutions?
I think the answer lies in the question. It's a bit of a setup. Look, I think we owe it to ourselves as a country to revisit all of these systems and institutions. To move. Look, I think there are so many different ways and models that we have of. As terrible as some things we've heard, even models of community detention, whilst they will continue to exacerbate and increase some of the trauma being experienced by people who are seeking asylum in our countries, as Moz spoke about, is it won't create others that are in that space too. And same, if we can apply that same set of thinking to some of our institutions and systems. And, I guess what I'm trying to say very carefully is at what cost will we have to reach before we have the will to actually address some of these systems? Because if we all knew how much Serco was making in a year, we would shudder at we would just want less than 5% of that in diversionary programs and facilities to be able to create far better outcomes other than the making of political points. There are way more things that we could do with just a little a toenail of what they get in funding in service of political ideology and points.
Yeah, well, that's when you really start scraping beneath the storyline, don't you, to see what vested interests and what business is flowing in these evil circuits. And then you'll understand the resistance to change. But we're still here, and we're going to keep talking about positivity and what we can do, because there is things that are being done. And even with Moz's discussion, it's a resistance. You have to have a forum where we're at least able to look at different perspectives, what's working, some best practice. Then it may be incremental, but change is often incremental. And so we can't give up on the incremental change, because that's about all there is, really, is incremental change and the ongoing openness to discuss what's not working and look at what is. Kimberly, a question came in for you. So see you, Jon.
So yeah, sorry, bye everyone. Thank you so much, Moz.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jon.
Thank you, Amelia. Bye.
Okay. Kimberly, there you are. Change is stifled, despite us knowing the issues that persist and the consequences of inequitable access to adequate and appropriate healthcare for First Nation peoples. Why do we struggle to make meaningful progress?
Thank you. Apologies as well if my connection's a bit dodgy.
Did you hear the question? Do you want me to? Do you want me to send? Do you want me to speak?
No, it came through okay. But can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. I think Moz had a really great point before, and I'm not going to articulate it as well as he did before, but he spoke about evil being upheld by people upholding the bureaucracy, and these are people who benefit from this system and who also hold a lot of the power. But if I can flip to sort of what can we do to change this situation that we're in, I mentioned in my pre-record the Wiyani Thangani project, and I held up the physical copy of the report. And following on the release of the report, we've developed an implementation framework, which has been channeling the momentum that's been built from Wiyani Thangani, and it provides guidance for translating the findings of the report into meaningful action, and provides examples of innovative First Nations women and girls-led initiatives across a wide range of sectors, including the health sector, but also looking at climate justice and what it means to have and example collective leadership and establish birthing on country centres and things that raise women and girls out of poverty, but in doing so benefit all Australians. And this is going to take a real collective effort to heal as a nation. But I believe if we can use programs and the work of Wiyani Thangari, the work and worth of our First Nations women and girls who are holding the solutions to create the change that we want to see, then that's our best bet in changing the current situation.
Thank you, Kimberly. I also think, Moz, the question that we asked Kimberly, I would also like to draw you into if you would respond, because it touches on some of what you spoke about. But what can be done? What can we do to make progress in areas where, as you say, it seems like there's the evil systemic barriers that don't seem to ever break through to encourage change unless you're able to find the power of your creativity or through legal action. It's all incremental and dependent on the individual's capacity. What do you say? What can be done?
Excuse me, did you ask me this question?
I
I'm
did.
sorry.
That's
Sorry,
all right.
I was just got confused. So what I am saying is, it's very important to trust I am talking about the sector. Trust the refugees who have the capacity of challenging the system, not talking on behalf of the refugees. Like a refugee in this situation is doing that. They are locked up in this situation. Let the refugee talk about this situation. And the person has a name, not only carrying a label all the time. It's like 10 years, but still I feel I'm carrying some labels, which makes me more traumatized, that I am a person like how you like to be introduced. My name is Azimitabar, but I feel many times I have been introduced as a refugee. I am very proud that I am a refugee, but I mean, it's not only a refugee. When someone who has the capacity of challenging the system in different ways, the person shouldn't be reduced as only a refugee. It's about the trust, and it's about communication, how we can provide a place for this person, because if someone like for example, if I can manage to see Prime Minister without spending $1, but the sector, if they spend $500,000, they haven't managed to see Prime Minister to talk about refugees. It means that I am in the place that I can see the minister through a lot of good connections, through a lot of trust, that the people that trust me, I trust them. So the people who have the power to provide a space for me, that go and talk with Prime Minister. You are important, most. You are not only a refugee, you are important. Go and talk to them. Talk about this situation. Like, how long do I have to live here to here? I need to be away from Australia. I want to live in Australia because I am a part of Australia. I came to Australia for safety, like other refugees, like 1,000 other refugees who are in detention. These people are not illegal. So when I talk about refugees, it's when I, for example, just an example, when I paint, the painting is not only it's not only a painting. I'm trying to bring the story back. I want to create a situation to talk to different circles, to talk about my situation with people who are interested in art, people who are interested in music. That's why if we go to different circles, we can bring a lot of attention. That why before the election, the politicians talk about, genuine refugees shouldn't be in detention. But now, after the election, we are receiving letters that this is not okay. And I am saying that again, that we need to trust refugees who have the capacity of challenging this system. That it means a lot. It means that I also respect the people who helped me to be in that situation, and through my resistance as well. My resistance helped me to continue my life. My life have been in a lot of trauma, sadness, but I don't give up because I have created a lot of resistance through good people in Australia, through good people in my life who always encourage me to do, for example, art, to write, to tell stories, and always proudly I smile at wonderful people in Australia. And I am very proud that through a lot of trauma and suffering, I have managed to be friends with hundreds of good people in Australia, and they are absolutely like my new family. I never leave my new family. I love my new family. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Moz. Starting to tear up, so I'm glad that's come to that you've finished. But I think your message of finding the humanity in your story, sharing the humanity, and being accepted as part of an equal human being rather than a criminal or some horrible label that's been put on you by the system to dehumanize you and your story.
Thank you very much. Just one thing I'm going to add.
Very quickly, because I must move to Sophie.
Yeah, like the situation, people like a girl who has been killed, who was killed because she didn't have hijab, and the government killed, and they said that this is the rule. If you don't have hijab, we kill you. This is horrible. So I escaped from that situation from different reason, because I was in danger. I came to your land for safety. And now after 10 years, I say, I totally forgive. I don't want to talk about why I was tortured like this. I don't want to talk about it. I say, I totally forgive. We all need permanent visa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Moz. And now, Sophie, I'm aware you're also on a time clock and you have to leave. So the last question really is, and it's suitable for you being a paralegal at the National Justice Project, is about legal recourse. Can you talk to us about what legal recourse options are available to people who have been further traumatised by the health system and individual health practitioners? So a very practical nuts and bolts question about recourse.
Yeah, I think in summary, there's a number of complaints processes, such as the Healthcare Complaints Commission. But I would say also, though, that it would be remiss of me not to say that this process itself can be quite difficult. And I think having support through that process is particularly important. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about, the certain language that these kind of bodies need you to speak. And so it can be very inaccessible, but the processes are there, and having the support to go through them is incredibly helpful. So I think complaints is the main one, main recourse option.
Okay, we're going to have to draw this wonderful webinar to an end. Just a quick segue from Sophie's discussion briefly on complaints. Please look at the National Justice website. You'll see links to the Tech for Justice and Call It Out, Racism Register. So very much go-to places to look for for managing a complaint. And the Tech for Justice is a project in development, but it will expedite complaint management. And we hope to be able to fund this project fully in the near future. I'd like to thank everyone here. Kimberly, thank you so much for coming in. Moz, incredible to have you. Thank you. You've really shared so much and you've carried so much on your shoulders, and all I can say is that it's incredibly humbling to have you with us and also inspiring. I really love your story of courage and resilience. You have not given up when many others would. And in terms of it being World Mental Health Day, sometimes it is just about one step in front of the other and just not giving up. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, Jon, who's left. Wonderful contribution from Jon. And thank you so much, Sophie. I'll be seeing you soon. And please, we do have resources that were developed in consultation with advocates working with diverse communities. These resources are called Trauma-Informed and Culturally Safe Care, Self-Care and Practice. Sorry, Safe Care and Practice. And they're on our website. So we will be circulating them shortly, and they're also available on our website, and we encourage you to share them with your networks. And this has been a really wonderful session. We could have spoken for another hour, I think. And I'd like to thank again all the panelists and Ariane and Aisha, who are our powerhouse of partnerships and projects at the NJP, who were critical in bringing this forum together. So thank you very much, everyone, for your attendance, and I hope you've taken away practical and inspiring insights. And the National Justice Project is very proud to have been able to organise and host this event. So thank you, everyone.